No, I pay taxes in China and in Taiwan, but no taxes in America.
Oh, yeah.
However, I still have to file taxes. I don't owe any taxes, but I still have to file this massively complicated tax return just to say I owe them nothing. It's like I gotta get TurboTax in order to calculate my zero that I owe them.
You're a missionary as well over there?
Well, no, not in China. It's actually illegal for me to do that. I can't like I do sometimes, but not like I'm not like missionizing there because it's actually illegal. I have to sign a contract that says you will not evangelize Christianity or human rights in China, and so I don't. And the New Testament, the New Covenant says obey the law of the land. Okay, well there you go. I don't have to. So I'm obeying it. I don't have to evangelize
Well, that's
here.
interesting. Because Judaism has a similar precept, at least within Rabbinic Judaism, of Dina de Mechota Dina, that the law of the land is the law, but only when it doesn't infringe on some Torah requirement.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a Christian perspective, that would be infringing on the Great Commission.
But
For example,
I still am able to do it anyway. I mean, like, without mentioning it. Like, for example, I'm a history teacher, right?
Mhm.
And so as a history teacher, I teach different religions. So I teach the various religions of the world, So I am able to teach something or I'm able to evangelize a bit, but not any direct, like, you should believe in Jesus. I don't do that.
would you feel that the New Testament would be against you lying in the sense of telling them that you're not going to do it, but you will do it because the Bible commands you to and God commands you to? Do you think God in that case would want you to lie?
Am I lying? No, I'm not lying.
No, no.
Where am I lying?
I'm not saying are you lying. I'm saying does your theology in this case allow you to lie if you're promising this government
No.
that you... Okay, all right. Because
I
in
can't.
Judaism...
I shall not lie.
Now, Judaism takes a different approach on this.
Mm-hmm.
The statement that you shall not lie, are you quoting a statement Paul made, or...
Oh no, I mean, well, thou shalt not bear false witness, right?
Oh, okay. All right, so that's been interpreted differently in Judaism. That
But then there's
doesn't mean...
also
Mhm.
but then in the New Testament also says all liars get thrown into the lake of fire, right? So that covers all lies,
Okay.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so in Judaism, bearing false witness is not necessarily some blanket prohibition on not telling the truth. For example...
Yeah, it's just that specific thing, right? You can lie in other ways, but not bearing false witness against your neighbor, yeah.
So I think that's typically understood on a court setting. But one example Dennis Prager always gives is that if someone is chasing a woman to rape her and she passes right by you and you know where she went and the rapist runs up to you and says, "Where'd she go?" Do you think God would want you to tell the truth at that moment or lie? If someone would stick to some...
Wait, say that again. Say that again. Run that by me one more time.
Okay. Someone is chasing a woman to rape her or to harm
Yeah.
her. And the woman passes by you, goes a certain direction. If the person chasing her asks you, "Where'd she go?" In that instance, would God want you to lie or tell the truth? So it seems that Judaism has never had a blanket prohibition against lying just because it values common sense in every instance of your
Well,
life.
you could just say, "Hey, I'm not telling you." See? Problem solved. I'm not telling you. I don't know. Oh no, if you say I don't know, that's a lie. You do know, right?
All right. I'm all for people being truthful, but I'm for people using common sense as well. I don't think the Bible has a blanket prohibition of lying. There's actually an instance in the Bible where God commands a prophet to lie. He tells the prophet Samuel when he's going to anoint David as the new king that if Saul stops you, tell him that you're going out, look for a sheep for the sacrifice. We see God. Now, it could be, well, if God tells you to do it, then that's God. But that's an instance where God endorses not being fully truthful with people.
Right. Well, there's that other part where God sends a lying spirit to one of the kings, right? I think it was Ahab or Hezekiah. No, not Hezekiah. It was one of the evil kings. And one of the one of the angels comes up to God and says, like, what if we sent because they had to get him killed. Like, God was like, we need to get rid of this king. And then the angel says, why don't we send a lying spirit to go trick him into fighting in that battle, and then he'll get killed. And God's like, okay, let's do that. Here, 2 Chronicles 18:21. He says, and he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, thou shalt entice him, and thou shalt go prevail. Go out and do even so. So one of them had the idea of, like, I'll be a lying spirit in the mouth of all the prophets.
So the Torah endorses this. With God doing it himself, God says that he's going to send you prophets to test you.
Right.
So this is just an illustration of that. And so it shows that God himself masquerades as something he is not. This is why I think the issue is a little more complicated than just saying we're not allowed to say something that's not true. All right. Now, someone could do this. If someone,
but that's Old Covenant. New Covenant is an entirely different covenant. So New Covenant is stricter. You know what I mean?
Okay, no, fine. I mean, I'm just speaking for the Jewish covenant.
No, I get it.
I'm not trying to justify
I like the Jewish
the new one.
My favorite testament is the Old Testament. I'm Christian, but I like the Old Testament a lot.
So you're saying that Jesus in some way was able to embellish the previous covenant with commandments that didn't exist in that initial covenant?
Yeah. I mean, he does that the whole time in the New Testament. Like, for example, like he adds to the law and he takes away from the law. So, and is he allowed to do that? Yes, because he's God. He issued the first covenant. He's the guy writing the whole book practically, right? So yeah, he's allowed to do that. And secondly, the other prophets were doing that too. Like, for example, Malachi, the last prophet, issued a commandment. So, but there's because I run Jewish Christian debates, right? And there was a common argument among the Jews that, if he added or took away from the law, then he is a false prophet. He has to toe the line of Torah law in order to be a true prophet, right? And I was like, that can't be true, because there were after the Torah, there were prophets issuing commandments at several points. So, for example, Malachi, right? In Malachi 2 and Malachi 3, he issues a commandment. And so that's technically adding to the law, right? Well, God can add to the law. He added to the law in the first place when he issued the Torah, right?
I mean, it tells us in Deuteronomy chapter 12 and 13. I mean, remember, chapter breaks were added in much later. That a prophet who brings something new, something that doesn't resemble the initial message handed to you by your fathers, that prophet you take out to stone him. So that's one. And the way this is understood in Judaism is that the Torah endorses the rulings of the priests, the Levites, and the judges of those days to create fences around the Torah, to even institute new laws, but these laws are not considered Torah law. They're considered, nowadays they're considered rabbinic law, but back then they were considered the laws of the elders, of the judges. But being that there's a statement that appears twice in Torah that one can add or take away, it would be unbecoming of anyone who came after Moses to create a law and expect it to be kept by every Israelite like it was given by God. There's many places, not just Malachi, where new laws appear in the prophets that don't exist in the Torah. For example, Isaiah says that one should rejoice in the Sabbath. This is a notion of Oneg Shabbat in Judaism. Mm-hmm. Now that's considered a law in Judaism, but a rabbinic law. Just because if we would consider it a Torah law, then we would be liable for adding to the Torah. If you make that distinction, then there's no issue. See, the thing is, it's the rabbis, or I don't like using the word rabbis, but the judges who compiled what Christians call the Old Testament. They put these books together and sanctioned their study, but the Torah never endorsed this. Torah never said whether we should look into historical books or books of the lives of the prophets.
But Moses said, if a true prophet comes to you that's speaking the words of God, you must hearken to him.
Right, for sure.
Right?
But
and if that new prophet issues a new commandment, then you must follow that new commandment.
Oh, it doesn't say that.
Well, you must hearken. You must hearken to him, right?
Well,
and do all he says. I mean, that's the whole point of.
You have to look at that chapter in context. At least Deuteronomy chapter 18 says that when Israel begins to emulate the nations around them, then God will raise up for them a prophet, and he will speak my words, and those words you have to hearken to. This is why prophets were only sent to Israel when Israel is behaving in a wicked manner. Why? Because the job of the prophet is to bring Israel back to the initial message. I mean, that's what God says in Torah, that he will either bless you or curse you, like if you keep these laws.
I remember the part where he says, when they're becoming wicked, then I will send a prophet. Where does it say that? I think it just says, I will send a prophet. I don't know if it's contingent upon whether they're wicked or not.
It's true that prophets don't only appear when Israel is wicked, but the commandment to heed the instructions of the prophets begins in Deuteronomy chapter 18. Hold on. So we can read it together.
I mean, you're basically. I mean, they're basically right. They were not. When the prophets would show up, they were not following the covenant. Right. So that's generally true.
Well, Deuteronomy chapter 18 is the only commandment in Torah that tells you to listen to prophets. We have to read it in context. We just can't start, I believe, in verse 16, where it says, I will raise up for you a prophet. You have to start from the beginning of that chapter. And I understand that chapter breaks and verses were added in much later. So if you want, you could start even before that. But it speaks about wicked nations and Israel emulating those nations. And then it goes into God raising up for you a prophet and you listening to that prophet. Like, he's not endorsing progressive revelation. He's saying that the prophet is going to speak his words to bring him back to the law, right? Like, not to.
Oh, wait. Hold on now. Deuteronomy 18:18 says, I will raise up a prophet among the brethren like unto thee, and I'll put words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I command him.
Right.
So in other words, he says, I will issue new commandments.
No. All that he commands him.
Yeah, well, that's a commandment.
No, but he's telling.
Whoever shall not hearken to my words, I'll require of him. So they're issuing new commandments.
No.
I mean, and so
he's commanding the prophet.
Hold
on. He's commanding that prophet to utter certain words.
Yeah.
Like whether it be a timeline, like whether it be a warning of things to come, not new commandments. Hukim Mishmatim, not the same commandments that he says before and after, that if you keep these laws.
In the prophets, there are new commandments, though. In the later prophets, there are new commandments.
These commandments are understood as rabbinic commandments because the prophets also sat as judges amongst Israel. We know people like Ezra, the scribe, the priest, these individuals, that when they entered the land, they told the Israelites to divorce their wives, this and that. Now, this is not a new commandment they're uttering, but there was a sense of civil law that could not contradict the original law. There's no way that Israel could have kept the Sabbath if there weren't checks and balances, if there wasn't civil law telling us how that Sabbath was to be kept in a uniform manner, because there was a death penalty attached to it. There had to be some consensus. But a law developed by a court in Israel could never be called Torah law. It was considered by today's terminology as rabbinic law.
Well, I think God could contradict his previous commandments. Like, for example, in the covenant with Noah, he says, all things shall be clean unto you. You can eat basically anything, right? Well, the Mosaic law contradicts that. It says, no, this shall be unclean to you. This shall be unclean to you, right? Mm-hmm. Does not Mosaic law contradict the covenant with Noah?
It's two different laws.
I mean, if you could think of it as adding to the law of Noah, like it adds 613 commandments to the law of Noah, doesn't it not?
I never understood that to be known as the law of Noah. That was the law given to all humanity, right?
Well, the covenant.
Right.
Of Noah.
The covenant of Noah was really the rainbow in the sky that God shouldn't destroy the earth with water. Now, the Mosaic covenant, the covenant received on Mount Sinai, which was really an extension of the Abrahamic covenant, was to those who accepted it. It was to a different set of people. Now, I know God would want everyone to come to the truth of that covenant. It's not a contradiction in the text. God tells all humanity what he prefers them to do. On Mount Sinai, he made sure that the people accepted and chose that greater covenant. He says, choose life that you shall live. It's not a contradiction in the text. One is a covenant made with the Jewish people, not necessarily flesh and blood, as anyone who wants to buy into that ideology. And the other was a statement made, well, not necessarily a covenant, a statement made with all humanity. I don't see it as a contradiction. As a matter of fact, the portions in Noah are not even considered Torah. Now, yes, they appear in the 5 books of Moses.
What do you mean? They're in the Torah. Why not Torah?
Well, because Torah means instruction. As you know, the book of Genesis wasn't given on Mount Sinai to the children of Israel. Every year when the children of Israel were commanded to read the law, there weren't commandments were given to Noah or the story of creation being uttered. It was the commandments that they received on Mount Sinai and all through the desert.
Right.
Although colloquially, that we call it Torah nowadays, it's not considered the book of the law.
Right.
Yeah. So,
well, actually, I've been reading. I was reading that the ancient Hebrews considered the entire Tanakh to be the law.
I'm not sure where you heard that from.
Like it's, I mean, not all of them, but some of them. Well, I'll show you.
The Tanakh